that, I'm happy to introduce the moderator of our next panel, which is Equity and Energy, and that's Supervisor Nathan Fletcher from San Diego. As I mentioned at the onset, we were honored to have Mayor Gloria from the city of San Diego, and we were intending to be there in person. And so we still wanted to honor some of those, San Diego pillars in our program. And so we really appreciate Supervisor Fletcher's participation today as the moderator. He serves as the chair of the San Diego County Board of Supervisors. As chair, he is committed to ushering in a new era of bold, progressive policy making, which aims to transform the County of San Diego for the better. A committed environmentalist, Chair Fletcher uses his position on the California Air Resources Board of Supervisors, and as chair of the Metropolitan Transit Agency to ensure we tackle climate change and work to ensure environmental justice. With that kind of background, I can't think of a better person to be moderating this discussion. And so I will hand it over to the supervisor to take it from here.
Thank you. Thank you, David. Thank you for the introduction. And thank you for you and your work and your organization for pulling this together. I think the entirety of your summit is incredibly useful and valuable, and a lot to be gained. And in particular, I think this discussion we're going to have today around equity and energy. And, we talk a lot about equity in today's world, but really talking about how it relates specifically to the energy sector is important, because we know that particularly as we move into clean energy and renewable sources of energy, from an environmental justice standpoint, the communities most impacted are often some of the communities where it's hardest to place these things. We know from an economic standpoint, the benefit that homeowners can get, that small businesses can get, but only if they have access into it. And so we've got an incredible panel here today of folks to really discuss and share decades of experience between them. And so I'm going to call on each of you and just ask you to kind of briefly introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we will dive into questions. We will start first with Panama.
Great. Well, first of all, thank you to the Chamber for having me. I'm really honored to be on the panel. And also, Chair Fletcher, it's great to see you. I think you're an accidental YouTube star now, and I just want to thank you for your leadership in the San Diego region, particularly in this public health crisis and everything you're doing and standing up for people's health in your region. So honored to have you as our moderator today. My name is Panama Bartholomew. I'm the director of an organization called the Building Decarbonization Coalition, and we are a coalition of utilities, manufacturers of heating equipment, the design and construction community, local governments, and other nonprofits. And we work to eliminate pollution from the built environment. And we do that by really advocating for switching over from natural gas over to all electric building types. We find this to be cheaper, we find this to be cleaner, and we find this to be safer. And so we advocate for that at the state and local level, and looking forward to the discussion.
Wonderful. Thank you, Panama. Thank you for your kind words and for joining us. Sam.
Thank you very much. My name is Sam Bayless. I'm the Director of Policy for the California Fuels and Convenience Alliance. We represent the fuel wholesalers, so the trucks you see driving around moving the fuel to those local gas stations, to farmers, right down to the retail gas station level. So we are everybody below the refinery level in the fuel supply chain. As we represent a wide variety of members, we do see members moving into, like in the last 20 years, moving into things like biodiesel, renewable diesel, but down at the retail level, we do see a lot of growing interest in electric vehicle charging and hydrogen use. So it's a really exciting time to be in this space. And thank you very much for having me today.
Thank you, Sam. Robert.
Good morning, Chair Fletcher and fellow panelists. Let me just also add my thanks to the Cal Asian Chamber for putting this important symposium on in this particular panel. I'm really excited about the discussion. My name is Robert Kinney. I'm Senior Vice President of Regulatory and External Affairs for Pacific Gas and Electric Company. We're the gas and electric provider for 2/3 of the state, headquartered in Northern California. And I lead our external affairs function, which is our local governmental affairs, community relations, our charitable giving, and our foundation, as well as our regulatory affairs function, leading our relationships with the FERC and the California Public Utilities Commission. So lots of interaction with infrastructure investment and infrastructure deployment, and even more importantly, how we engage our communities as we transition to a clean energy future.
Wonderful, thank you. And then my fellow San Diegan, my friend Mitch Mitchell.
Chairman Fletcher, it is always a pleasure to see you and talk to you, my friend. Mitch Mitchell with Sempra, and we are the parent company that is that owns the two affiliates, San Diego Gas and Electric and Southern California Gas Company. Southern California Gas Company, the largest gas distribution company in the country. For the last 15 years and 9 months, I have had a responsibility for local government, state government, charitable media, customer communications, and Panama. Good to see you. I've spent a lot of time in the Capitol over the last 8-9 years, working on issues around the topic of clean energy and the clean energy transition in California. I think it's safe to say that we're proud to have been one of the loudest voices over the last 7 or 8 years on the issue of electric transportation and on the issue of decarbonization. I think that one of the things that is really most important is AB 32 really focused on carbon. And our focus as a company is on how we reduce carbon. And I think that one of the things that I'm most proud of is that we really tried to bring balance to the discussion around decarbonization, because the portfolio that will allow California to make progress towards its climate objectives has to be broadened. It can't be just wind and solar. It has to be wind, solar, and everything else. Hydrogen, hydrogen is a big part of this, but I think decarbonization is a key phrase. And I'm always happy to hear Panama say that. Because the definition of decarbonization is electrification, but how you get electrification has to include a variety of technologies.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all again. I mean, decades of experience kind of here today. When we think about issues of equity and energy, I mean, equity drives so much around what we did around COVID was really understanding kind of the historic lack of access to things. And we're finally having that conversation. We still, at times, I had to get out my whiteboard and explain equality versus equity and kind of what it means as we bring folks along. But it still is fundamental to this notion that, in the American dream, there's no equality of outcome. There's supposed to be equality of access to a better, healthier, more successful future. And at the Air Resources Board, we try to think about that. The AB 617 process steers us in that direction. As chair of our transit agency, when we're placing those zero emission electric buses, we think about what neighborhoods most impacted by air pollution, we place them in. And when we think about everything we're doing around economic development, education, opportunity, it really is, how do you intentionally and systematically address historic issues that have created barriers? As a county, we recently declared racism a public health crisis. It is. The reality of asthma rates in San Diego is not a function of geography. It is a function of race. The reality of life expectancy, the reality of so many of these issues. And so I think to spend some time today talking about how we do that equity in energy, recognizing that the barriers, the regulatory hurdles, the challenges to get in, some of the upfront costs you need, all of those types of issues. And so I just kind of want to throw out an open-ended question, and I'll go to each of you to talk about or share some tangible means to achieving clean energy for smaller, locally owned businesses, a lot of minority-owned businesses in communities that often get left behind and forgot about in so many of the public policy things, and how we do a better job of achieving that aim and that intention. And we'll start with Robert.
Great lead into the question. I was going to say great question, but I think that we all know it's a great question. And I will say for starters, what you said, Chair Fletcher, about the need for intentionality and being deliberate, that's first and foremost, because we've got to be very pointed and intentional and deliberate in identifying the problem as you described it, before we then are intentional and deliberate about describing solutions. And so when we talk about, equity in a clean energy future, particularly as it pertains to small businesses, I think it's not even limited to equity in driving a clean energy future, but equity more generally. And the things that we're focusing on, particularly specifically related to helping small businesses and working with small businesses, is through our supplier diversity program. And I don't want to get into the details of our spend. We were very proud of our spend. We spent about $3.9 million with diverse businesses. But what's more important than that is capacity building. And that's where I think we have a significant impact, helping small businesses become large businesses, helping tier 2 suppliers become prime suppliers. And so we have a whole host of programs, and through the pandemic, some of our programs we had to pause on. But we have a technical assistance program that works with our diverse suppliers to help them to go green, to help them become cyber secure, to make sure they're operating safely. And we host a whole series of strategic sourcing workshops. All of this is intended to help these businesses not just do business with us, but to be able to do business more broadly. And so it's a significant amount of capacity building. We've committed in 2021 and in 2022 that we're going to strengthen our relationships with a whole host of small and diverse firms to help them grow, working closely with our internal sourcing and with our supply chain champions to identify suppliers for both short-term and long-term solutions. We are constantly examining our sourcing processes to identify and remove obstacles and barriers to preventing suppliers from competing effectively. We know that as a large corporation, it can sometimes be difficult to do business with us, and that is particularly pronounced for small, diverse businesses. And so we're constantly reviewing our sourcing processes to make sure that we can remove obstacles. And then we're working with community-based organizations to provide the technical assistance that I just described. So it's not just PG&E offering these, but we're working with civic organizations, with the Asian Chamber, for instance, and other chambers of commerce to bring technical assistance programs to our small and diverse businesses. I think, when you want to talk about equity, and particularly as it pertains to this conference, I think it's really all about economic development and making sure that there's equitable access, but also targeting our efforts on those businesses that have historically been starting behind the starting line.
No, and I think that's good. One of the things we did, obviously county government's different, right, than a company. To add that intentionality, we as a board of supervisors, we consider things, we docket items. Every item docketed now has to include an equity impact statement, which means no matter what you're doing, how is what you're doing? Because that goes back to that intentionality where you've got to really think about this. We do an equity impact report. We do a lot of that. And so I think all the things you described are things, we just got to see more of and more focus on leading on. Mitch, let's pivot a little bit to some of those smaller locally owned businesses. How do they get in the clean energy space? Like how do they access? Yeah, there's barriers, right? There's inequities when we look at who has what renewable type stuff. So how do we address that?
You're right, Chairman Fletcher, and I will say that in my new role, I'm now the Senior Vice President of Diversity and Community Partnerships, and we're looking at how we truly overcome this barrier, this very situation. I will say, first of all, I think that government agencies have to understand and acknowledge that the utilities are a great catalyst and partner for the private sector and making these entrances happen faster into these communities of concern that don't have the same access. Look, let's be honest. Equity can only happen when everybody's at the exact same place, starting at the exact same place. And you don't have that in a lot of urban communities that are generally Black and brown and Asian. I'll give you a great example. Small businesses. How do you get these small businesses into it? There are hundreds of thousands of small, we call them strip mall spaces, right? And in those strip mall spaces, you have small restaurateurs, you have small businesses that are minority owned. And the question is will they ever see access into these things? Solar canopies. Years ago, we pitched an idea to the PUC. And we said, listen, let us build solar canopies in schools in these underserved communities. Let us build solar canopies in the parking lots of these strip malls so that they can benefit from the sun that's shining 350 days a year. And the commission was a little, we don't know if we like this necessarily. We have to acknowledge that if you really want to bring these small businesses that are in these little small strip mall lots and small businesses in general into this new age of energy technology, we have to have a catalyst for that to happen. I think when you talk about it, hydrogen fuel cells can be placed in a lot of these small strip malls to power them, which does two things. One, gives them access to clean energy, but B, it allows you to look at how you put in battery storage and solar canopies, things of that nature. It also allows you to really address the issues of the grid that we're having now from 4 to 9 p.m. every day, right? So we have to start thinking about how we island off components, and a lot of these areas that again are in some of these areas will never have this happen unless we create programs that again allow us to bring these technologies there. Now, there's another thing. I think that the PUC probably and the state have to look at creating special access programs. Years ago, the state of California offered a program called Cash for Clunkers. They were trying to get rid of all the old appliances, right? Smartest thing from a residential standpoint, right? They were saying, look, Bart, if Panama needs a new refrigerator because his is 30 years old, we're going to give him $250 to change that out rather than $40, which means he's not going to. He's just going to keep using duct tape. You have to start looking, for example, Chairman, at all the small corner retailers, right? These are generally minority owned, and their refrigeration systems are old and antiquated and big consumption devices. The PUC and the state have to think about, how do we truly create a real incentive program that's going to allow them to do two things: change out that equipment, and maybe that's the right time to look at rooftop solar, putting rooftop solar on, so that's helping meet the demand of that new equipment. But again, more importantly, it's creating that access. And we just don't have a model in place today that really looks aggressively at this space, which is huge from an energy consumption standpoint, and how the utilities can partner with SAM and Panama, and we can bring this to these communities that have heard it over and over and over again. Yep. Yes, we want to help you, but it never happens. And I will end with this. Give you a great example. Chairman, you know this. Years ago, I went to Dole and I said, look, why don't you guys agree to electrify your entire operations lot and change out your trucks from diesel to electric and RNG on the way to hydrogen? I asked the state of California for $13 million to do that. That Dole was going to change out they were going to change out between 250 and 400 trucks. The small business owner that owns those individual trucks, and you know this, Chairman, the trucks that Dole uses are independently owned by small and generally largely minority-owned truckers. They're not going to go out and buy a brand new truck that is cleaner energy because they can't afford to. So I asked the state for the money, because that's another example where I'm going to take 300 truckers at minimum and take them out of the diesel space and put them into an electric truck or into a new, on their way to hydrogen electric or RNG truck, which is going to reduce emissions, which is going to reduce impacts on 92115 and Barrio Logan. And the state said no. We just have to do better. We have to do better.
No, and I think, Mitch, I think that exemplifies, like, the market isn't going to solve this problem, right? It's going to have to be some intentional things to recognize, hey, this is not meeting that overall goal. At the Air Resources Board, we took flack when we were working on the EV rebate program, because at what cost of the car is that rebate not influencing your decision?
Yeah.
If you're buying a $100,000 EV, is a $2,500 rebate going to make the difference or not make the difference? No, it's not. If you can afford a $100,000 car, that really doesn't make a damn difference.
Let's
be honest, it doesn't. No. And then we talk about how many cars can you get? Like, if you're getting your fourth one, come on. And so how do we right size that and then put that into, if you are in one of our 617 communities, the cost is prohibitive to get in. And so that's where we do something like, we have the program called Clean Cars for All. It should be called Clean Cars for Some.
Sure.
But how do we provide an incentive big enough to get you into that space, right? So that like where it is cost prohibitive.
Yeah. Well, you're right. Remember, you and I have this conversation.
There's not any, and like the first one in, and then the neighbor sees, and it sure is. It's a fight, because every time you talk about moving something around,
it's a fight. It's a fight, and the cost of EVs is not just the cost of the car. That's right. Insurance is higher, right? Where you're going to charge, because remember, we have a large segment of our population that lives in condos and apartments.
Right.
The state has to get serious about how you're going to accelerate that transition, but that means you have to create partnerships that build the infrastructure in those neighborhoods. The Cal Enviro Screen should be the biggest guide to the state of California right now. When you look at the neighborhoods that are in the top 30, how many chargers are you going to find? Public chargers. How many are you going to find? How many battery storage components are you going to find? How many solar panels are you going to find? I can tell you right now, don't be surprised when you can count the number on one hand.
That's
so
right.
we just have to be better about it and be more
Yeah,
focused.
Yeah. Panama, what do you think?
Well, thank you. It's great to follow Robert and Mitch because I agree with a lot of what they say. You know, at the heart of our climate and clean energy plans has to be our economic development plans. And fundamentally, a lot of this transition is going to be about consumers and businesses making choices about their fleets and their buildings. And as Mitch said, when their appliances break, when their heating systems, water heating systems break, what kind of decisions are they making, and how can we be putting in place intentional programs that actually work to be able to help them to make what is a better decision for clean energy and our climate future. And so I completely agree with the need to focus on economic development as the heart of our climate policies. Over at the coalition, you know, we really view this issue of equity as one of access. You know, do you have equal access to energy and to programs at an affordable price, regardless of your location, your situation? And are you also not overly burdened by the pollution from different energy sources as well, based on your situation or location? And so what we really focus on is both the capital costs of the transition for small businesses and then the ongoing operating costs. And we think that electrification has a really good story to play there if we can get people to be starting to make this switch for buildings. And so on the capital costs, it's really about how do we work with partners at utilities and CCAs and the state government about getting in place programs that will allow us to make these changes at the rate of change we think we actually need to meet our goals. Because the rate of change for appliance switch outs don't necessarily meet the rate of change with our clean energy goals. And so we need programs that are actually going to encourage people to be making the switch, such as Mitch's point on cash for clunkers. And so incentives that actually incent change, and then also financing. You know, how do we have financing that will actually work for small businesses at terms and in program designs that allow capital markets to come in and help? So this isn't on the back of ratepayers, this isn't on the back of taxpayers, but we have capital markets coming in through innovative financing to be able to help small business be able to make a switch. And then lastly is operating costs. And the good thing about these new technologies, these heat pump water heaters, these heat pumps for cooling and heating, these induction stovetops, et cetera, is they are incredibly efficient, about 3 to 4 times more efficient than your best-in-class gas or electric resistance models. And so what that does is it helps you save money when you install that for your heating system or your cooling system or your hot water heating system. And then what we need to work on is really rates. And how do we right-size rates in California to really be encouraging this transition onto electrification to make sure that our rates are supporting the transition to a clean energy future rather than causing anybody to delay that transition moving forward. So upfront costs through good quality financing and incentives, and then really working on high efficiency equipment and rates to be able to meet that.
In Panama, it's actually a great point. The right sizing rates and figuring out where those need to be to get more people involved. And so we have members, gas station members, who have actually received some PG&E funding, and it's just a testament to how popular those programs are that millions of dollars was gone in minutes. And it's kind of turned into a battle of who's going to be able to get funding and who isn't. And looking at small businesses, minority-owned businesses, especially in my space, where we have a lot of immigrants, a lot of people who are first and second generation Americans may not necessarily know how to work through some of that bureaucracy. And so it could end up being that a lot of these companies that are receiving this funding are those larger businesses, those ones that are better equipped with legal departments and grant writers who are able to go in there and get that money. But speaking to rates, it's really hard, especially in my space, to get somebody to put in the electric vehicle charger. when our commercial electricity is 80% higher than the rest of the nation on average. And so it is a difficult business concept for especially a small business to determine where the return on investment is going to be, because gas stations aren't big sites. Every square foot that you have needs to be in some way generating income for you. And so it's been a pretty hard process to really determine where that fit's going to be, where that inflection point is going to be, where it really does make sense. And it really has been a struggle, especially for a lot of our smaller members that maybe missed that funding, that maybe don't have the bandwidth. I mean, they're working their stores from 8 a.m. or earlier, those rush hour times when a lot of these meetings are. They're not necessarily the best for those who are working and serving those customers who are out there during rush hour traffic.
Sam, how do we, on that point, because this is a really good point. That's a really good point you just made around, you can put all the programs in place, but large entities who are used to getting government programs and that type of thing, like they know how to access it, they've got it figured out, they got the forms, they probably have some legal counts, they got some compliance folks. But I thought, when I first came in as a supervisor trying to bring changes, we did appointments. We wanted to appoint people to positions who'd never been appointed to anything before, right? So that was one of our things, right? When we do appointments, have you ever been appointed one before? And we were actually looking for folks who said no. When we did COVID grants, you had the federal funds come out, which, were great if you knew how to access federal funds. And, we tried to figure out based on, different ways, and literally sent people out going door to door business. Hey, we'll help you fill out the form, we'll help you do this. But it's hard because a lot of these small businesses, to your point, they're busy running their thing all day long, and they don't have time to sort through like this ARB thing and this PUC thing and then this thing, and then I got to fill out this and that. And so, like, how do we crack, that piece of like better helping folks who just traditionally they're not sitting around looking at a website for what's popping on what may be there. I mean, how do we do that better? Because I don't think we're doing it well right now.
No, and I think it's a very tough question to answer, and I don't think that it's going to be a one size fits all solution throughout California. Working with groups like mine, working with groups like the California Asian Chamber, working with and going down even into more local groups. Because there are a lot of organizations that maybe you or I aren't familiar with, that we hear at the Air Board or in the legislature. But there are industry focused groups that are either minority based or regionally based, that there's a lot of opportunity to go in there and work with them and really educate. Education is going to be the biggest piece on this, and showing them, hey, here's the money that's available. Here's what you can do with it. Here's what it will do for you and your business. Especially, I don't know, I believe it was Mr. Mitchell who brought up the fact that more than half of Californians live in multifamily housing. I live in a duplex. There's no way I could run an extension cord across out my window, across the sidewalk to my car. And so really identifying areas of need with higher EV penetration, things like this, especially focused on transportation, higher electric vehicle penetration, and looking at those gas station sites or other sites where there is a potential to put in a charging network to serve that underserved area, because like I said, it's not going to always be happening at your home or at your place of business. A lot of places don't have that charging ability. And so looking at where we can, it's similar to Mr. Fletcher, if you're familiar with the AB8 hydrogen map. So they based it off of existing or potential gas station sites. And so really identifying strategic points on the map of who you can go to. And it really does need to kind of be a top-down solution if you're going to look at it from a strategic map wave or a type of system for building out an EV network. But it's really that's the toughest nut to crack, is how do you reach those people who don't have the bandwidth? Well,
and we did, one thing, Sam, when you talked about that, it triggered, when we were doing some of our economic stimulus grants, we partnered down in San Diego with our Asian Business Association, my friend Jason Pagiel. We partnered with the Black Chamber, with the Latino, and we basically said, hey, we're giving you all a head start, right? You get a head start. you go out, get your folks signed up, we're going to set aside some of this. There's going to come a point where whatever's left has got to go out. But, how do we give you some help? You can get out, you can help assist. And I think, and then once folks get in and they get through that process once, then it's easier and you start building some of that capacity to come back and do it. Mitch, what do you see on this one?
Look, Sam's right. I think the harsh reality is we have to go back to kitchen table speak, is what I always say, right? Make it simple. I'll give you a great example, Chairman. When the state and the federal government gave us money for rent and utility relief this year because of COVID, we sat at the Housing Commission. I'm a commissioner. We talked about, I said, we cannot fail, right? And we will fail if we do this the old-fashioned way that has always been told. Put a couple ads in the paper, put it on the website, and people will show up. That never works. What we learned during COVID is a lot of people don't have computer access. They don't have internet access. So what do? We managed to allocate $130 million for rent relief and utility and water bill payment every dime they gave us, because we did the old-fashioned way. We partnered with organizations like the Cal Asian Chamber, and we partnered with our labor community, and we went to neighborhoods and we signed people up the old-fashioned way, and that's why we were able to allocate every penny we received. I think that on this point, and Sam's right, I remember asking Governor Brown's administration, hey, let us go cut a deal with gas stations that are independent owners and operators, and we can go in and put in charging at those gas stations. And the governor's office looked at me like I was crazy, and I said, look, Sam owns a gas station. As the number of EVs goes up, he's going to sell less gas. He didn't make money on gas. He makes money on chips, water, soda. If I put in chargers at that gas station and somebody's going to show up and charge for 20 minutes, they're going to buy chips, water, soda, coffee. He's going to be happy. And they thought this is the most foreign thing. But you know why I wanted to do it, Chairman? Because there's gas stations in every neighborhood. It made too much sense. And this is where we have to be better. We're not going to affect communities of concern until we start thinking that way. Make it easier, right? And Sam, I'll be honest, we love to partner. I think this is a great opportunity for us to say, let's go the old-fashioned way, go out and talk to people, tell them how to do it, help them do it, and we can be successful. Chairman, I would say this. I spend a lot of time with all three of the chambers, the ethnic chamber, the Cal Asian Chamber, the African American Chamber, and the Hispanic Chamber. We should put together a collaboration lab day, collab lab, and get everybody on this call together, sit with you, and think about how we collaborate better in the state of California to bring about these changes and to make these things happen. Take that back to the agencies and say, hey, this is what we want to do together, because it's not going to happen without us.
Got it. Very, very good. Well, you know what? Let's open it up. Let me see if we have any questions from anyone who is moderating or who is participating in this panel. Questions you'd like to throw out for the panel in general, or anything specific that you would like to hear. While we wait for a few of those to populate and pop in here, let me go back to Robert and then Panama, and just any of these examples you've seen or ideas you have around, how you can go into help folks get into energy programs, other programs that have historically, the barrier has just been too high or the access has been too difficult. We'll start with Robert and then we'll go to Panama.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things. One of our signature program, and this is, utility jobs sometimes don't appear to be, the sexiest jobs in the world, but they're good paying jobs. And I see Panama reacting. But these are high paying jobs that allow people to enjoy a good, high quality of life and raise a family. And one of our signature programs is our Power Pathways program. And it is a training program to get people into the utility space as a lineman, line worker, and other skilled trade positions. And that's, again, but it was something that we deliberately and intentionally had to create. And then we partner with community organizations like Cypress Mandela in Oakland, so that we're going into the community and we're helping to train folks, and we're making these good paying jobs available to the community. So that's one example. But I think the overarching way that you've got to do this, it can't be the utility or the company telling folks, here's what we're going to do for you. It requires active and deliberate partnership with community organizations. And we have And again, to the point of being deliberate and intentional, we've created forums in which we are able to actively receive and provide feedback from the communities that we work with. At both the local level, we have a whole host throughout our service territory of local stakeholder advisory groups that we meet with on a very regular basis to discuss a variety of issues, including workforce and economic development. We have a California community advisory group, same thing on a statewide basis. And it was the recognition that, you know, utilities, corporations are often viewed as providing top-down solutions and telling folks what we think is good and best for them. This flips that on its head and says we want to hear from our communities how we should be working with you around workforce development, economic development, where you want us. I'll give you the most recent example. We announced recently a plan to do 10,000 miles of undergrounding, and people were shocked that we said it and wanted to know specifically what the plans were. And we were very clear. We've got some risk modeling that will determine where we're going to do this, but we're going to couple that with feedback from the communities that are most impacted by wildfires. We're not going to just say, we're going to come into your community and we're going to underground 10,000 miles. We're going to work with you and find out where you want us to do it and how we can do it in a way that's most meaningful and least disruptive. You know, so that's really got to be the starting point, is collaborative, deliberate community outreach, education, partnership.
Got it. Panama, what do you see? Give us some wisdom on what we do here.
Yeah, I would agree with you know, some of what Sam and Robert said about this issue about who is the right messenger. And all due respect to, you know, the wonderful utilities on the panel, the utilities aren't always the best messenger, and neither is the state government always the best messenger for small businesses to be around programs and policies that can help them make this change. And so it's about how do we partner and collaborate, as Robert said, with the trusted voices, with the chambers, with more local groups as well. That is really, we can get information out to small businesses about what's available to them, but also timing. We have to actually be developing programs that can actually work for small businesses. And to do that, we need to listen to small businesses and understand their needs. And so there aren't many small business owners that are waking up on a daily basis and thinking about their refrigeration system. You know, they're not thinking about their water heating system. The only time they think about it is when it breaks. And so going around and talking to them about it beforehand and giving information like, when this breaks, you know, how old's your system? When this breaks, here's the program for you. Here's the way to go, because you don't help people on the transition into clean energy in an emergency situation when they just need their refrigeration system right now to get it up and going, or they need their hot water back that day to get it going. You need to be able to be touching people with education from a trusted voice before the emergency happens.
So they know, so they can access it and figure that out. One thing we did, you know, we did like on the electric vehicle side, you know, the ride and drives, because if you haven't been in one and you don't have a friend who has one, it can seem like a spaceship. But you got to take that ride and drive into the actual community where folks don't have it. And you can't do it on a Tuesday at noon. You know, you got to do it in a time when people aren't working. And then on site, you got to have people to say, hey, look, we got this special program based on your income for extraordinary thing. And then we got this thing to help you with charging, and we got this thing, and let us walk you through it all, and then do that ongoing follow-up. Because again, absent that, you're going to end up with the same folks getting the same cars in the same neighborhoods. And that's true whether we're talking about refrigeration or rooftop solar or any of these things, right?
I want to just chime in on that. And one component, which, because Sam mentioned this earlier too, Chairman, is this goes back to the state evolving, because when you charge matters. So you're right, ride and drives are perfect. Take them to the neighborhoods where you want to sell cars, get the secondary market up and operating, and talk to them about charging. We all, both Robert and I we work for companies where we offer special programs for people to charge after 9, right? The problem you run into is that people that live in condos and apartments can't charge after 9. As Sam said, I'm not going to run a long orange extension cord. But the PUC has created these programs that benefit. I drive an EV. I'm on my third one. They've created a program that benefits me. I own a garage. I have a house with a garage. I have a charger in my garage, and I know that I can plug in, set my timer, and it starts at 9 o'clock, and I get the special rate, right? But for the person that is not living in a house with a garage, wants to buy an EV, does the ride and drive, they won't ever be able to take advantage of that special rate for charging because they don't have a charger and a garage. And this is the stuff that's hurting communities of concern. I give Pat and the Cal Asian Chamber credit because we've had these discussions for years. Panama, I would agree with you. We're not the best messenger. Robert and I could go and we could talk all day, but we're the utility. But again, the collaboration is important because, organizations far better than us at communicating, should be the front face, and we should be propping them up and helping them. We're not going to get there unless we collaborate and we're creative. It's just not going to happen. And to be honest, we've been talking about this for way too long for us to be moving this slowly.
Yep. So let's do this. We got a few minutes left here. I think what we want to do, one question that came out, David Nelson shared with us, said our poll this morning showed the majority concern of our participants was about infrastructure related to energy resiliency. Is a fully electric model reliable for a state as large as ours? So what I want to do is ask that question, but also in the context of that question, have you say, what does a clean energy future look like in your mind and from your organization standpoint, and how do we get there? So the question about, is a fully electric model reliable for a state as large as ours? And in the context of that, what from your standpoint does the future look like as we tackle this energy of clean energy, and what does it mean? And we'll have about 2 minutes each. And Panama, we'll start with you.
Great. Thank you. And thank you to the Chamber for having us. And the reality is that our economy and our lifestyles rely upon electricity grid. And we need to, and we're in unprecedented times. I mean, who could have ever expected when we were building out our grid that we'd be having hurricane force winds on land, inland, in our mountain ranges? The reality is that we are dealing with weather patterns that just could not have ever been anticipated or expected, unless you listen to climate scientists. And so we need a stable electricity grid for our economy to function plain and simple moving forward. And I have confidence that we are going to meet the moment, and we are in the process of building out the resilience of our grid, and we're going to, whether that's through islanding, whether that's through microgrids and strengthening the current grid we have, whether that's through undergrounding or fixing up old pieces. We are going to, because we need a stable electricity to make it work. So the question of what does a clean energy future look like to me, it's one of clean air. We still have 5 of the 10 worst air basins from a pollution perspective in the country here in California. And so a clean energy future is an opportunity to clean up that air. It's one where we have affordable energy and comfortable living and working spaces. And the way we get there, I think, is helping to right size rates. And a key part of that is actually electrification. And the more kilowatt hours we're able to spread out the financing of the infrastructure that we put out there, that's going to help us actually control rates moving into the future. The Public Utilities Commission says one of the best ways for us to control rates is electrification of transportation and buildings moving forward. And then we need to be really helping with energy assistance and pushing the legislature and the administration to make sure we have the programs in place for financing and incentives to be able to help people make this transition.
Perfect. Thank you. Sam, give me all you got in about 2 minutes.
Sure. Yes, so energy resiliency, obviously very important to my members. We typically aren't able to pump fuel, especially in times of PSPS shutoffs, brownouts, blackouts. But my members do fuel evacuees, fire trucks, emergency services during these emergency events. And obviously, Mr. Fletcher is familiar, our cancer risk assessments are likely going up because of increased use of backup generators, of diesel generators. And so moving towards a more resilient future, it makes things more stable for business. The only way the businesses are able to plan into the near, medium, and long-term future is having some sort of stability and knowing what tomorrow is going to bring, knowing that the lights are going to be on tomorrow, knowing that we're going to have the ability to sell whatever product it is that we're going to be selling. and really deliver that for our customers, because our customers do have loyalty. It might not be to a brand, but it will be to that location. Think about if you do drive an internal combustion engine vehicle, you have one or two gas stations that you like to go to. And once you aren't able to serve that customer just that one time, there's a fair likelihood that that person won't come back. And so that resiliency and having that stability and ability to plan for the future and to be able to have business as usual is very important to my membership. So I do appreciate all the hard work of everybody on this call. Robert,
What's the future look like? Clean energy.
So I'll say the answer to the first question, can we be fully electric? Can we have a fully electric, reliable model for the state? I think the answer is yes, but it's not free. And it's also got to be done in an orderly fashion. And so I think we are going to be investing billions of dollars in infrastructure over the coming years to put steel in the ground, as well as to do enhanced veg management and routine veg management. And so, and with those billions of dollars of steel in the ground, that comes with jobs, and that also creates taxes for our local community. So that's number one. But we had this discussion a minute ago about the need for sustainable rates. And I think that there is a real opportunity for us to start thinking much more creatively about more progressive ways of paying for infrastructure that benefits the society as a whole, so that you don't have a subset of Californians, i.e. utility customers, paying for those investments that are societally beneficial. And so I think there's a real good opportunity for us to start to rethink how we collect our revenues as a utility, and start looking more broadly for how we pay for these significant investments that are societally beneficial. And I think that's going to be important, because if it's not affordable, it's not sustainable. And we can't divorce the cost of all of these investments that we're going to be making from the state's very ambitious clean energy goals. And I think historically we kind of have. And I think we're at a moment now where we've got to think about these simultaneously and can't think about them divorced from each other. And I think that's what a sustainable clean energy future is going to look like, is one in which we're making the investments that are necessary, that are societally beneficial, that create jobs, increase tax base, but we also ensure that we're spreading those costs equitably and fairly.
Got it. Very good. Mitch, final thoughts.
I'm gonna be specific on this. First of all, I'm gonna be the one lone person that says, look, I agree that we can electrify most things, but we've got to we got the 5th largest economy in the world. I'm not saying use traditional natural gas, but hydrogen has to be a part of this discussion, hydrogen fuel cells and any other new technologies. So we have to expand the portfolio. Tell the market, develop other options aside from wind and solar that we can use to decarbonize our economy and our space. 2, I think we have to have a much more aggressive inland communities focus. It's where you've seen the people who are struggling the most. They don't have the money to do all the things that sometimes the coastal communities have. And the inland focus means we've got to be more resilient. It's getting hotter, windier. Robert and I can both attest to that. You know, everybody thought we were crazy in 07 and 08 when we said, hey, it's getting hotter, drier, and windier, and it's out of control. Today, we realize that inland communities need to have more resiliency. We need to put microgrids out there, create safe spaces. We need to create programs where people that live in the inland communities can access these new technologies, putting solar on their rooftops, cutting back brush. All these things need to happen, but there needs to be an inland community focus. I think of the appliance rebate program. Remember my comment earlier. We create rules that benefit those that have plenty of money. Net energy metering is the biggest imbalance. And Chairman, you know this. Your incredibly brilliant wife recognized this and tried to tackle it, and they came after her. People in the inland communities living on $20,000 a year should not be supporting people making $250,000 a year on the coast. It's wrong. And I will tell you, the other thing is time of use. PG&E is rolling it out. We've got to create real incentive programs for appliances. But Panama, Sam, what our folks need, residential and businesses, give me the ability to play in that space and not be penalized. If you have a dishwasher that is a Maytag, doesn't have a delay switch, you're going to run your dishwasher at 6. PG&E and Sempra, and we're going to penalize you because you're doing it. You didn't do anything wrong other than you're living. And then the next is we've got to accelerate transportation. Clean energy transition happens because this is the biggest problem is transportation, both on the business side as well as the residential side. Get more EVs into the space, but you've got to create real incentives and real pros, especially in those zip codes that are lacking. And then rate reform. You know what? You're not going to do any of this because electricity is going to become cost prohibitive. No one's going to want to electrify Panama if the cost of the electricity per kilowatt hour continues to go up. No one's going to want to switch to an electric vehicle if they start going, well, wait a minute, the cost of electricity in my house is this high. Why would I get an electric vehicle? Rate reform has to happen. It's been put off by the regulatory bodies for far too long, and it's punishing the people who can least afford that type of punishment. And so we've got to get to it.
Got to get to it. Wonderful. We are at time. I want to thank all of our panelists, Sam, Panama, Robert, Mitch. Thank you all. And again, David Nelson and Cal Asian Chamber, thank you for convening this, for letting us all be a part of it today, and for the entirety of the program you're doing and all the work you do. We are very, very grateful to join you and be able to have this discussion. So thank you all so very, very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
everyone.